by the way, he said that I did poetry readings in a bookstore, but I'm gonna be clear, I don't write poetry. Like I teach people about poetry, but these weren't like me, you know. I was teaching Beowulf and Chaucer and nonsense. That's my area. My area. I mean, that's one of my areas. Is I do a lot of stuff with poetry, and then a lot of stuff with film, and a lot of stuff with superhero comic books, and it kind of goes together. Poetry and superhero comic books, by the way, niche audience. That's the connection. You either read all the poetry and all the superhero comic books, or none of the poetry and none of the superhero comic books. So the audiences are tiny, and they know every single thing, and they get all your little Easter eggs and your references, right? So that like when Logan makes some reference to an earlier X-Men movie, people are like, "Oh, I know who that is actually." And then also poetry, you know, when Alexander Pope is talking about chaos and eternal night, and you go, "Oh, that's a Paradise Lost reference." It's the same thing. So which is why I put this, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, was because there is a school. There's a vibe in rock criticism which I don't like. And it's a kind of like, man, if you interpret the lyrics, then you're ruining it, because interpretation ruins everything, man. You just got, it's the vibe of the thing, man. And I just, it makes me want to strangle people. As a person, like, because I think that's, as a person who studies poetry for a living, I don't think that's right. I think that the more we can kind of think about the lyrics and put them together, and it doesn't mean that they have to lock into place. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about Neutral Milk Hotel is that these lyrics are not necessarily forming a 100% coherent whole, and people are going to go, well, I think it means this, and I think it means that, and I think those both can work. But the idea of, there was a book about Neutral Milk Hotel put out by 33 1/3, which again, hardcore Neutral Milk Hotel fans, the kind of lunatics who would spend their Friday nights in New York City doing this when there are a million other things to do, you may know that book. And it's got some good information about the band and how they work, and the way, I'm just going to hang it there, I don't know. There's a lot of good information in that book, but it definitely takes the attitude that like the lyrics are not something to pay attention to, or it's a very journalistic book. And we need that. I'm not saying we need journalism, and we need people to go in and figure out how things got made and what was the situation and what was the context for it. But in my mind, it stayed too far away from the actual thing itself, right? I'm a big fan of the old school T.S. Eliot, nonsense, where you lock yourself in a room and you look at the poem and you don't look at a lot of other things. You just look at the words that are on the fucking page, and that's what you work with. So I appreciate the context, but I felt like they talked around the album, but not actually about some of the core things. And I'm not going to be talking about all the things today, because my area is not in music. You're the music person. You should do another thing about the music, which would be amazing. But my thing is lyrics, and I take them seriously. I don't listen to enough music because my criteria for lyrics are too high, which is why I only listen to Neutral Milk Hotel and the Mountain Goats, and fuck that guy for being a brilliant novelist in addition to a brilliant, God distributes his gifts unevenly. But rap, I listen because rap's got great lyrics, and that's right. But that tends to be where I lock in. So I wanted to look at the lyrics to this. But before I do that, last time I taught this, someone in class reminded me that on I think it was the 15th anniversary, Vulture magazine had April Ludgate, not the character from Parks and Rec, who, if you know Parks and Rec, she pisses off her boyfriend by saying that her favorite band is not her boyfriend's band, Mouse Rat, but rather Neutral Milk Hotel. And they asked her to write a piece for Vulture about why the album is so good. They didn't ask the actress. It's in character. It's credited to April Ludgate. And I just wanted to kind of read it as a sort of epigraph to the whole thing. Because I think this is actually better at describing what's good about the album than that whole book about Neutral Milk Hotel. So she says, that album is great because it's not made up of songs. It's a bunch of weird, musical inspirations that flew down from outer space and lodged in Jeff Mangum's skull, and then he recorded them because if he hadn't, they would have rattled around his brain forever and driven him insane, which is way better than songs. After you listen to In the Airplane Over the Sea, you are never the same. Once you hear Jeff Mangum howling about Anne Frank and ghosts and semen and bombs and medical specimens and jars and teeth and dead dogs and Holland in 1945 and synthetic flying machines and your mom sticking a fork in your dad's shoulder, you will never be able to listen to, Third Eye Blind again without ripping your ears off. and you will look around, and all these stupid people who have never heard it and had their lives changed forever will seem like primitive cavemen who don't understand anything, and you'll feel like a god because you have been exposed to Jeff Mangum and his crazy brain. And sometimes you'll think about the songs and like start crying in a grocery store because you can't take how awesome they are, but it's totally worth it. The end. Love, April. And then she made it longer. She mentions 10 things about the album. It's not really 10. They use a singing saw in a lot of the songs, and it's haunting and scary and great, and as I will point out, always connected with death. The saw as an instrument in this album is always connected with death. It's the eerie sort of UFO noise that you'll hear throughout the album. There are 2 long, like, musical interludes, which usually I hate, but somehow when they happen on the album, I love them and usually start crying. This is an important one. Listen to O Comely. It's like 9 minutes long, and Jeff Mangum wasn't even supposed to like play the whole thing when he was recording it, but he just like went into the studio and did it in one take. And at the end, Scott Spillane from the Gerbils was in the like sound booth or whatever, and he was so blown away that Mangum had played the whole song. He yelled, "Holy shit!" And they left it on the album, and you can hear it way in the background. It's one of the best. It's the kind of thing you'll hear it better on these speakers if you haven't noticed that before, but it's great. They left it in because that's how everyone feels when they listen to O Comely. The only possible response to hearing O Comely is to yell "Holy shit" as loud as you can. Just when you think the album can't get any better and has grabbed you by the throat and shaken you around in order to make you understand how beautiful and sad the universe is, you get Ghost and Two-Headed Boy Part 2, which are both so good it makes me want to punch someone. Two-Headed Boy Part 2 contains this lyric: "And when we break, we'll wait for our miracle. God is a place where some holy spectacle lies." Beat that, anyone else? The song in the Airplane Over the Sea contains the lyric, "And one day we will die and our ashes will fly from the aeroplane over the sea. But for now we are young, let us lay in the sun and count every beautiful thing we can see." Beat that, anyone else? She's amazing. So what I have for you, because I'm a poetry professor and this is how I live my life, you get handouts. And I think it's important because the last time I did this, I had a kid, I can't believe I shouldn't say kid, but I had a kid come up to me, and basically, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but his basic point was that he had never just sat there and listened to a whole album from start to finish before, because I told people, I was like, you gotta put your phones on airplane mode or whatever. Airplane mode was a joke, okay, I'll work on it. But like, I told him to shut he'd not had that experience before. And I think even better than that is if you actually get to read all, because we know you should, right? If you really like an album, maybe you sit down and you pull the lyrics up, but do you really sit there for 40 minutes to an hour and like do every lyrics? If you're like me, you do. But a lot of people, they don't do that. And even if you do that, you probably don't do it as often as you should. So this is going to give you a chance to do that today. And also, I'm going to be talking about these. What I want to do, the structure for what we're about to do, is I'm going to talk about these lyrics, just the lyrics, for about 40 minutes. And just talk about some things to sort of sensitize your brain so that when we start playing it's going to kind of sensitize your brain so that when we listen to it, you'll notice more things than maybe you would have noticed on a previous listen. Yeah, share it with me. Maybe at least one. They look like they like each other. They'll be the same. Everybody gets lyrics. All right. I also want to say that I know this, and this is a typical poetry professor thing that I have to do, and I just have to say this, and I know it makes me sound ridiculous, but I'm saying it anyway. I've never been a professor for a dog before, and I feel like this is like the greatest teaching experience. Doggos. The thing I want to say about this is the stupid shit that I say all the time, and I'm saying it now. Jeff Mangum's closest affiliated person is Dante. And I know that doesn't initially seem right because you want to. I think that's the closest connection, and it seems deeply wrong. One of the reasons why it seems really wrong is that Dante has a reputation for being like, I don't know, the official Catholic poet, the official Christian poet, the Orthodox Catholic Christian Italian nation poet guy. And you guys, Dante, right? Divine Comedy, Inferno. Half of what you know about hell is, first of all, is not in the Bible. I don't know if you know that, by the way. Nowhere in the Bible does it ever physically describe Satan once. If you think that hell has levels, that's Dante, right? Before Dante, hell was a hole in the ground, and after Dante, before Dante, you speak of the mouth of hell, and after Dante, you speak of the gates of hell. It's what Dante makes it into like an urban. I love this. This is so much fun. Dante turns hell into an urban space with levels. Like, that's how influential he is. That my students go, Professor, that's in the Bible. Like, no, it fucking isn't. And then my priest will go ask him. He's, and they come back and they're like, you were right. He doesn't have wings. Like, yeah, I know. So Dante, the thing about Dante that connects him to Jeff Mangum is that Dante has this reputation for being official and churchy. But actually, all the official stuff you know about Dante, he's not parroting back official doctrine. He's making it up. And it's so persuasive that you think that shit's in the Bible. It's not. But the thing about Dante is that he does something. Dante's status as famous, canonical, major Italian, major Catholic, major Christian, major poet, epic poet, obscures how deeply bonkers he is. Dante is the most bonkers poet who has ever lived. What Dante did is that he's walking down the streets of Florence, and he saw an 8-year-old girl who was a banker's daughter named Beatrice. And then he wrote a poem, which he wants you to understand that this isn't Bible fan fiction, right? He's claiming that this is real, right? That he was given a tour of hell, and that when he tells you what's happening, this is like whatever the New Testament was to the Old Testament, Dante is to the New Testament. He's giving you additional information about the cosmic scheme. And we talk about Dante and Beatrice as his inspiration to guide him through hell and all of this stuff, and he's got Virgil. He is walking around with a dead pagan poet who is giving him a tour, and at the end, he makes it clear that 8-year-old banker's daughter that he saw once on the streets of Florence plays a serious role in the salvation of all mankind as she sits on the right-hand seat next to God. Like, she's as important as Jesus is. That's not Catholic doctrine. That's not any kind of doctrine. He has taken something completely bonkers and elevated it into this. He's taken a young girl and he's elevated her into this bonkers cosmic realm. And now you can, if you weren't with me before, you can see this is where Jeff Mangum comes in, because Neutral Milk Hotel and the Airplane Over the Sea is an album that's about Anne Frank. And he does a very similar move. He does to Anne Frank what Dante does to Beatrice, which is that he takes a ordinary, well, I guess not ordinary, but a relatively ordinary young person. I mean, she didn't have magical powers, so she's not extraordinary in the X-Men sense of the word. But he took her and put her story into a larger cosmic hierarchy, which is exactly what Dante does with Beatrice. So, yeah, let's just go into it. All right, so let's take a look. So King of Carrot Flowers, you all have your handouts, students. So one of the things that I want to emphasize, worth noticing, is pay attention to what happens between the songs. Because it's interesting, I mean, and April Ludgate, thankfully, talks about songs. They're not really songs, are they? One of the things is that Neutral Milk Hotel, there are breaks in the tracks on the CD or whatever, right? But there's often not breaks in the music, that one track flows into the next one seamlessly. Not always. There are a couple of parts where it drops out and you can hear complete silence. But very often there'll be like a humming that will take you into the next part of the song, or the next part will start immediately. And there's very few breaks, because for Jeff Mangum, the album is the unit of thought. The Beatles invented that concept. Before the Beatles, you had singles, and you could put the singles together on records, and you could play the singles in a row if you wanted to. But the concept of the album as the unit of thought is really the Beatles, and it's also Neutral Milk Hotel. That the album, and this is why it's, and I'm really glad that they had the kind of In the Airplane Over the Sea song that's got kind of radio play push behind it or whatever. It's, it works as a single, but the album itself isn't really meant to function like that in any way. It's meant to be a single sort of unified thing. And so the Beatles begins the album, and the album, by the way, is ended by Kanye West, I think. I'm not even joking, but Yeezus, in the cover of Yeezus is a CD, right? It looks like a CD in like a plastic clear CD case, and he described it as a coffin because he was killing the CD as a unit. And he starts putting things like Life of Pablo is something he was fiddling with up until he put it on, that whole debacle. But once it got on streaming, he could still fiddle with it. He could still change things if he wanted to. It's some kind of new area where he could go in, because once you buy something, people can't change it remotely. But with streaming, person can just be like, oh, you know what? I'm deleting that song, and that song could go away forever. So he's operating in another realm. In the Neutral Milk Hotel is squarely in the middle of album as unit of thought. All right, so let's look at some lyrics. King of Carrot Flowers, Part 1. So one of the things since it's an album, one of the things I want to talk about is to think about this as a unit, that some of the characters that occur in one song are the same characters that are occurring in later songs. Not always going to be the case. It's not always going to work out like that. Sometimes I might be overreaching by claiming two people are the same people. But when you were young, you were the king of carrot flowers, and how you built a tower tumbling through the trees in holy rattlesnakes that fell all around your feet. The Holy Rattlesnakes is one of these references to kind of the kind of holy roller, evangelical, mid-America tent Christianity with, you are healed, which is but it's that weird, it's religion, but in a weird register, in an unofficial, unorthodox fashion, right? It's culty, it's Christianity, but it's culty Christianity, which is the same kind of thing you're going to see him playing around with, all different kinds of religious imagery in this. And it's mixed up religious imagery. The towers tumbling through the trees it's very much kind of tarot card sort of imagery too, of the broken tower, which is one of the major tarot cards. But this opening is like a sort of introduction where he's talking. He's talking to an unspecified you. Your mom would stick a fork right into Daddy's shoulder, and Dad would throw the garbage all across the floor as we would lay and learn what each other's bodies were for. This is the room one afternoon I knew I could love you, and from above you how I sank into your soul, into that secret place where no one dares to go. So on the one hand, it starts to sound like some kind of vaguely incestual brother-sister kind of relationship. The learning what each other's bodies are for and sinking into your soul, I knew I could love you. And the Daddy's shoulder, it seems like those are their parents. But it's this is a very dreamlike space where these people will shift and move around. But one of the things is that, and this will come up again later, but this from above you, how I sank into your soul, is an image I think that reminds you of sex, right? Somebody on top during sex. But it's also an image of reading a book. Right, that you're above the book when you read, and that when you read, you sink into someone else's soul. And the book is the Diary of Anne Frank. It's his connection with Anne. And as in a dream, this is like classic Freudian whatever, that you'd think, I was in my house and it was also Yankee Stadium, right? That it's his sister and it's also his lover and it's also Anne Frank, who also is a book. And this book imagery, this lover book imagery is going to come back. And this may seem crazy that I'm saying this now, but as we go, you'll see this again, and it'll be locked more into place. But this opening song is about his engagement with. It's a little bit autobiographical about some kind of not autobiographical, but it's some kind of story about a broken home, about displaced unorthodox religion, about love, possibly incestuous, and about Anne Frank in this book. Your mom, right? And one afternoon, and your mom would drink until she was no longer speaking, and Dad would dream of all the different ways to die, each one a little more than he could dare to try. That this suicidal father figure will come back in the very final song. The album has a particular aim, and it's a strange one, but it seems like it's to save his father's life. Right, that his father is suicidal, and it's not mentioned a lot in the album, but it bookends it. So if this was a movie, you'd have the kind of prologue, and then you'd go into some kind of crazy dream space, and then you'd return to it as that new hipster version of, it's not new, where the wild things are, right? Where he has this experience in the real world and then goes to hang out with the wild things and then returns at the end. This is what we're doing with his dad. And that it's the album is to save his father, and that Anne, just like Beatrice, will play a crucial role in the salvation of all mankind, some 8-year-old banker's daughter that Dante saw, and Frank, who he communed with in a bedroom, is going to play some key role in the salvation of his father, who needs help. One song goes right into the next. King of Carrot Flowers. Now, the album notes, the lyrics are printed in very, very tiny little type if you got the CD or the vinyl or whatever. It's a little hard to read. Those next lyrics are not actually printed on the sheet that he hands out that comes with the album. He just makes a statement saying something like, people think I'm being ironic, but I'm not. This is really my true feeling. Because we don't always engage well with unfettered, unironic religious feeling. I love you, Jesus Christ, I love you, yes I do. I love you, Jesus Christ, I love you, yes I do. This is not a register that many of us contemporary New Yorkers feel that comfortable hearing, where, oh, he's kidding, or it's ironic, or it's, no, I don't think he is. And it's an important thing because it's one of the many registers that you'll see in the lyrics that promises resurrection. That the Jesus Christ story is an important, and it's not like he's uncomplicatedly Christian. Neither was Dante, neither was Milton, neither was Blake. But he's got some connection to Christianity, even if it's a holy rattlesnake Christianity. And that he takes it seriously, and it's necessary, because the whole promise of Christianity is that the dead will be resurrected. And one of the things he wants to do, in addition to saving his dad from suicide, is to save Anne Frank from death, which is an obviously nearly impossible task. But if anybody could do it, Jeff Mangum's going to do it. The next part of this is like a prologue to the rest of the album, right? This King of Carrot Flowers, part 1, 2, part 1 is sort of where he is in his normal space. Parts 2 and 3 start to head into some kind of weird zone before he gets to introducing the characters that are going to motivate the album properly as it goes. And on the lazy days, the dogs dissolve and drain away. The world it goes and always waits the day we are awaiting. Up and over, we go through the wave and undertow. I will float until I learn how to swim inside my mother in a garbage bin until I find myself again. These are images of rebirth, right? This is womb-like, water-like, being born from water, right? That he's inside my mother, right? This is a kind of amniotic sort of zone. That's liquid, right? It's wave and undertow is sort of the classic. That's the classic imagery that you use for sort of birth and amniotic nonsense. But it's also, it's one of those. It's both birth and death, right? This is this zone, this weird middle zone of birth and death, where things are born, but things are also rotting, right? That the garbage bin and the dissolving dogs, along with the birth of new life. It's he's inside his mother. Up and over we go with mouths open wide and spilling snow. I think it says spitting still, but I think it should be spilling snow. I will spit until I learn how to speak. Up through the doorway as the sideboards creak, with them ever proclaiming me, me. Up and over we go. The weight it sits on down, and I don't know. I will shout until they know what I mean. This is a kind of zone. He's kind of being born. And again, is he actually being born? Is there actually a narrative? Would you put this into a storybook? No. But the imagery, it's as in a dream, that it feels as if. It's a zone, it's this kind of muddy, liquid, life and death proto-zone. And by the way, Milton speaks of something very similar to this in Paradise Lost, where Satan exits hell, and in between hell and earth is this zone that is this crazy science fiction zone that is both life and death. It's both all of the pregnant possibilities, and also he says that it is both our womb and the grave to which the universe will return. And it's this kind of proto space where life comes from, but where it also dissolves to die. And this is the kind of place that he's talking about here. Good. Okay. In the Airplane Over the Sea. Then this song is justly popular. because it's one of the standard sort of humanities topos. It's carpe diem, right? This is one of the best, I think, ever examples of carpe diem. The sort of seize the day. Life is short. You have to enjoy today because you don't know if you're going to be around tomorrow. And you've all seen this, right? This is gather ye rosebuds while ye may. And this is one of the Shakespeare's sonnets. All say this over and over again. It is also, of course, the theme of half of Hollywood's movies, including Dead Poet Society, Titanic, and Saw. Right, so Saw, that's the point of Saw, right, is that people don't appreciate their lives, and he's dying of a brain tumor, and so he's going to kidnap people and chain them up and snap their heads open to teach them an important lesson. Okay, this is you may thought it was a horror movie, but it's actually the crux of humanism is Saw, which is that we all die, and you have to appreciate every single second of your life. It's the exact thing that Rose learned when Leonardo DiCaprio fell off that door and into the water. But that's right. But this is a carpe diem, and it's very impressive, by the way, that how many people have done carpe diem as a theme, and that this is one of the best sort of versions of it. Good. All right. Yep. Okay. What a beautiful face I have found in this place that is circling all round the sun. What a beautiful dream that could flash on the screen in the blink of an eye and be gone from me. Right? It says life is short. You got to appreciate life while you have it. Blink of an eye, it's over. Soft and sweet, let me hold it close and keep it here with me. And one day we will die, and our ashes will fly from the aeroplane over the sea. But for now we are young. Let us lay in the sun and count every beautiful thing we can see. One of the things he does where the music matches the sound must be an echo to the sense is one of those things Alexander Pope says, but that the sound of the thing has to match what it's about. And he does this with Aeroplane and Every. He wants you to notice every beautiful thing you can see, and that's emphasized by the fact that he takes a normally two-syllable word, sometimes one syllable in church, and turns it into a three-syllable word. Aeroplane, of course, that's the old-fashioned pronunciation of it, but aeroplane and every, we're stringing out each individual word, so you're feeling each individual syllable at a point where he's telling you to notice each individual thing. Let us lay in the sun and count every beautiful thing we can see. Love to be in the arms of all I'm keeping here with me. And this is where the theremin comes in. The saw. I don't think it's a theremin; it's a saw. But this is where that weird ghostly saw comes in. With death is hovering all over this song. What a curious life we have found here tonight. There is music that sounds on the street. There are lights in the clouds. Anna's ghost all around. Hear her voice as it's rolling and ringing through me. So this is the first, and it's interesting that the song serves as a single. You can kind of listen to it without knowing any other Neutral Milk Hotel songs. But this, who's Anna? It's a very unusual to mention one person's name one time in a pop song. It's Anne Frank. And it's that book that kind of influenced him. And he was reading Anne Frank when he was creating the album, and we know he had a very sort of intense relationship with this book. So he mentions Anna's ghost all around, that he begins to feel the presence of Anne Frank sort of everywhere in the universe while he's appreciating all the things out there. Soft and sweet, how the notes all bend and reach above the trees. Oh, how I remember you, how I would push my fingers through your mouth to make those muscles move that made your voice so smooth and sweet. Again, sounds like sex. It's sexual, it's bodies penetrating each other. This is something that happens again and again and again in these lyrics. But he's also pushing his fingers. It's a book. You make the book speak by pushing your fingers into the book and turning the pages of physical books. This is that same feeling that he had on the sort of first song about sinking into her soul from above, reading the book that's Anne Frank's diary. All right. And of course, she's an especially tragic version of the Carpe Diem theme because she's this young girl who is, murdered by Nazis. And then we have her diary where she talks about, and she's living trapped in this tiny little space with seeing the same people and having to be in constant hiding. So it's one of those sort of, you have to appreciate life because you could end it any second. But she felt that on a more radical level than most of us probably will because her life was so radically foreshortened and because she was in danger and knew she was in danger for such a long period of time. I pushed my fingers through your mouth to make those muscles move that made your voice so smooth and sweet. Now we keep where we don't know, all secrets sleep in winter clothes. The one you loved so long ago, now he don't even know his name. Because, of course, Anne Frank, in hiding in the attic, sort of fell in love with Peter, who we kind of lost track of in the, there's attempts to sort of follow what happened to all the people in the attic after they were captured by the Nazis and betrayed, and that she loses track of him after that, right, where they're separated. So one of the crushing things about it is that Anne Frank loved this boy, and that they were separated, and then they were killed, and it makes it, this is the problem. Her death and the lost love is the problem that Jeff Mangum is trying to solve with this album. What a beautiful face I have found in this place that is circling all around the sun. When we meet on a cloud, I'll be laughing out loud. I'll be laughing with everyone I see. Can't believe how strange it is to be anything at all. And that's the first actual break. It's the first little chunk of silence that you will hear in the album, because those three songs run together. Oh, no, that's not true. Sorry, there's a break both before and after in the Airplane Over the Sea. That's why it stands out as a single, because it's got those blocks in it. Good. Minor key. Sorry, I got a lot of notes on multiple pages here. All right. The next song, and again, this is the important way to look at this album, is to kind of connect them together. The next song introduces the next character. These are not unconnected pieces, that they all link back together. So Two-Headed Boy is, and again, it's a dream, right? So it's kind of functions like a dream state, and that he weds wonderfully and strangely, I think, kind of Anne Frank, Nazi Germany, hideout, tragic stuff with very boisterous, rollicking kind of Coney Island insanity. And if you've seen the cover of the album, it definitely has that kind of Coney Island vibe to it, and a lot of the Coney Island aesthetic is a key part of that. So here we have this sort of classic Coney Island freak show, right? This is the kind of, and again, it's connected to that holy rollers, rattlesnake stuff, speaking in tongues, being possessed, which is when you get possessed by the spirit and start speaking, sometimes crazy things, which is exactly what this album is doing, that he's sort of possessed by this kind of, it feels like he's possessed by some kind of spirit. He talks about being penetrated and being sort of melded. It's a lot of melding of minds and melding of bodies in the lyrics. But one of the things he's melded is this sort of the Coney Island aesthetic of fetuses in glass and animals suspended in sort of formaldehyde. So he sings also to these sort of freak show character, the two-headed boy, all floating in like probably some kind of aborted child who's kept in glass, and then people pay money to see it. By the way, I don't know if you know much about the history of Coney Island, but one of the most interesting little rando tidbits about Coney Island is that the little baby incubator box, the little box they put preemies in, the guy that invented that was like, I invented a box that will save the lives of premature babies by keeping them safe in this little sealed off thing. And that people were like, no, we're not giving you any money for that. That's crazy. But this is like a really good idea. He could save a lot of babies with this thing, but he didn't have any money. So he went to Coney Island, and he told young mothers that you have a premature baby, and I can save your baby's life. But in order to fund this enterprise, I'm going to need to take your baby box down to Coney Island and let people gawk at your freaky miniature baby. And they did. And the money paid for the technology that we now have in every hospital, that if your baby's born prematurely, they put it in a little box. But that's the funding source of this invention, was the price of, I can keep your baby alive in a box, is I need people to pay a nickel to come see your freak baby in a tent. Look at the little premature babies with their giant heads and little tiny bodies, and people would line up and pay him money. And this is how he funded a scientific experiment that really needed to happen. It's amazing. I want to do this classic Coney Island, by the way. I want to act, because the Freak Show Museum is a great, I mean, this is fantastic, but that would also be fantastic. Two-headed boy, all floating in glass. The sun it is past, now it's blacker than black. I can hear as you tap on your jar. I'm listening to hear where you are. I'm listening to hear where you are. That somehow it's still alive, right? The tapping on the glass, sending signals. And the idea of sending signals is one of the important things that'll come back again and again with this album. Two-headed boy, put on Sunday shoes and dance around the room to accordion keys. This is resurrection again, right? Like just with Anne Frank and saving his dad's suicidal. He wants to save Anne Frank from death. He wants to resurrect Coney Island freak show babies. And he wants them to dance again. And in fact, the song right after Two-Headed Boy is a waltz. There's an instrumental piece that's the waltz, and it's not disconnected from this. He wants that kid to live again, to put Sunday shoes on and dance, and the next bit is a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 waltz. Put on Sunday shoes and dance around the room to accordion keys. There will be accordions in the next bit. With a needle that sings in your heart, catching signals that sound in the dark. Well, the imagery for the album is an airplane wings on a phonograph, and it's this technology sort of being fused together. But he also likes to imagine technology fused with people, that there's a needle, like a record player in your heart, and there's something in you that sends signals like radio signals and that can receive signals like the tapping on the glass. And it's an imagery that goes all through the lyrics of the whole thing, catching signals that sound in the dark. We will take off our clothes and they'll be placing fingers through the notches in your spine. Again, obviously dancing, obviously sex. But spine has two meanings. You also put your fingers in the spine of a book, right? It's that melding. It was my house, but it was also Yankee Stadium, right? That this is Anne Frank, or this two-headed boy, that you put the fingers in the notches of the spine is what you do when you read a really big book that you've cracked the spine on. You hold your fingers in there when you're reading. And that's how we know Anne Frank is through a book, and so her spine is both her physical spine and the spine of the book. Placing fingers in the notches in your spine, and when all is breaking, everything that you could keep beside. Now your eyes ain't moving. Now they just lay there in their climb, right? He wants to resurrect this kid, but the eyes aren't moving, right? The kid's dead. Two-headed boy with pulleys and weights, creating a radio played just for two. In the parlor, the music he sweetly displays, silver speakers that sparkle all day, made for his lover who's floating and choking with her hands across her face. The imagery of two people huddled over a radio was Anne Frank's. That was a huge part of her life in the attic, where they could only get signals through the radio. That was right. They didn't have iPhones and shit. So they huddled around the radio, and she talks a lot about meeting with Peter to listen to the radio together. The family listening to the radio together was the unity in the household, and the one time when the only way they could get information from the outside world, but also the only time they could maybe even have fun, was getting radio signals. You're trapped in a house with people you don't even like that much. But the radio was this crucial outlet. So he's imagining that the two-headed boy is going to be the sort of paramour for Anne Frank. He's sort of doing sort of post-mortem matchmaking with the two of them. This is going to be the person she can be with because she didn't get to be with Peter. He's going to save both of them, and he's going to put them together. And in the dark, we'll take off our clothes, and they'll be placing fingers through the notches in your spine. And when all is breaking, everything that you could keep beside. Now your eyes ain't moving. They just lay there in their climb. Again, he keeps bouncing back against the hard reality that people are dead, and you can't actually bring them back with song. Two-headed boy, there is no reason to grieve. The world that you need is wrapped in gold silver sleeves, left beneath Christmas trees in the snow. I will take you and leave you alone, watching spirals of white softly flow over your eyelids, and all you did will wait until the point when you let go. Christmas, Anne Frank's obviously Jewish. That's not a very Jewish thing, but the resurrection, right? This is what he's trying for, is the resurrection. And it's the I Love Jesus Christ from a couple of pages, one page back, and the Christmas references, that it's about resurrection. And this idea that winter, right? Winter, things in winter, this sort of pagan idea, right? That things in winter come back in spring. Right? You guys know Death with the hood. It's got the fucking hood and the scythe. And all my students think that the scythe is like a weapon that you use for chopping people's heads. It's a terrible weapon for chopping people's heads off, by the way, because the blade is on the inside. So if I was going to cut your head off, I'd have to get it behind you and then pull. And if you have a sword, you're going right. It's a farming implement, right? The scythe is for, you cut grass with it, right? It's what they had before lawnmowers. Because the metaphor is death as a farmer. That's why he has a scythe. He harvests the crop when it's time to harvest the crops. It's a farming metaphor. We just don't recognize it anymore because we don't know what the fuck a scythe is. And they always draw. It's supposed to have anyway. They always draw. It's not like it's supposed to have a thing so you can hold it. But it's a lawnmower, right? So that death. So winter is death. But as the harvest, right? You cut it when it's time to cut down the crops. You cut down the crops just like when it's time for you to die. Death comes to harvest your soul. But in the spring, the crops regrow and new things are born, and springtime is when things get born. And this is probably too remedial for you guys. But obviously, right, that's why Easter... Oh, I'm not even close in the thing, am I? Oh, I forgot about the camera. Easter, right? Is little eggs and bunnies and the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. What the fuck do the little eggs and the bunnies have to do with? There's no, right, as Eddie Izzard points out, there's no little bunnies around the crucifix when Jesus is on the cross. Because they're all symbols of new life, right? That eggs are gonna hatch and become birds, and bunnies are famous for fucking and making more bunnies, right? That's why they're the Playboy bunnies, because they're for fucking. Right? They're not the Playboy puppy dogs. They're not the Playboy lizards. Right? They're the Playboy bunnies because bunnies are for fucking. Right? So the bunnies are more bunnies, and the eggs are new babies, and that's Easter. And then anyway, those are the seasons. So that's why the Christmas imagery, because Christmas things are dead, but they come back in the springtime. Good. Made for his lover who's floating and choking with her hands across her face. We don't know how Anne Frank died, but one of the major thoughts is that she probably died of pneumonia. A lot of people in the camps did die of that. And I think there was I have to look that up again. But that's a major thought about how she died. So he's connecting Anne Frank to the two-headed boy. Then there's a musical interlude, which is a waltz. And it's the waltz that he wants him to get his Sunday shoes on and dance for. And it's very beautiful, and I love it. Then we get to Holland 1945, right, which is a song that's more specifically about Anne Frank. The only girl I've ever loved was born with roses in her eyes, but then they buried her alive one evening, 1945, with just her sister at her side, and only weeks before the guns all came and rained on everyone. Right, this is just before, if Anne Frank had only lived a little bit longer, she might have been liberated from the camps, and that's just as if the story needed a little extra tragedy to it. But again, Jeff Mangum is interested in resurrecting her somehow. We have the Christian resurrection where you come back in your own body, and here we have reincarnation. Now she's a little boy in Spain playing pianos filled with flames on empty rings around the sun, all sing to say, my dream has come. So he's reaching for any number of different kinds of... This is not an orthodox Christian story, right? He's got he pulls on Christianity for the resurrection, but also on reincarnation, that she could be someone else now, and she may still be alive in that way. And it's the overlapping of mythologies that gives this album a lot of its sort of gusto. Overlapping mythologies is a really important thing, right? William Blake combines all different kinds of mythologies together in one thing. Spencer and the Fairy Queen combines all different kinds of mythologies. Dante, right? Dante's supposed to be an official Christian poet. His whole vision of hell is totally ripped off ancient Greek ideas. Like the whole idea that when you go to hell, you get tortured with ironic punishments. Like, oh, you're really hungry. Well, here's a big, too many donuts for you, Homer Simpson. Right? That's not in the Bible. Nowhere in the Bible is that ironic punishments is not a thing in the Bible, but it's a thing from ancient Greeks, and Dante was like stealing that. But overlapping contradictory mythologies, right? And by the way, the best example of that in modern day is the Avengers, right? Because the Marvel movies, right? Because the Avengers are, what is that story? They took a lot of time to teach everybody who all those characters were before throwing them together. But just imagine if you just, the Avengers is a movie about a World War II soldier who teams up with a robot and a monster to fight an evil wizard in modern day New York, right? Like, that's like what is happening in that movie. But it's because it's got technology, and it's science fiction, and it's fantasy, and it's got religious stuff. These are gods, and it's why I get the sight of an American soldier yelling orders at a Norse god. That's great. But now we must pack up every piece of the life we used to love just to keep ourselves at least enough to carry on, right? That we have to keep going somehow, even with all this tragedy. And now we ride the circus wheel, again, the idea of the circus, Coney Island stuff, but also the wheel as a metaphor that goes round and round and round. That's that pagan stuff. You die in the winter, you come back in the spring, and it circles and circles and circles. Christianity, by the way, not about circles, right? Christianity is there's a beginning and there's an end, but the old pagan world is circles and circles and circles. It's Christianity's big thing, is to take the circle and make it into a straight line with a beginning and an end. But now we ride the, right, because in Greek mythology, right, you got the gods, they kill the previous gods, and those gods killed the gods before. It just goes back forever. Now we ride the circus wheel with your dark brother wrapped in white. Again, the imagery there is is finding someone for her, possibly the two-headed boy. With your dark brother wrapped in white, says it was good to be alive, but now he rides a comet's flame and won't be coming back again. Right? That he's gone now. But again, this resurrection, that maybe you live on in a comet somehow. Who knows? That's right above from where you are. He didn't mean to make you cry, with sparks that ring and bullets fly. On empty rings around your heart, the world just screams and falls apart. Right? And this imagery of time being a big ring that goes round and round, but also rings around your heart. That in individual, it's what's the fancy phrase for it? Microcosm, right? That the things in the individual reflect the things in the cosmos, and it's sort of matched up like that. And by the way, the resurrection stuff and the Christianity stuff, Sigmund Freud said, in the unconscious, there's no contradiction, right? That somehow it's your house and also Yankee Stadium, that these modes of belief, we don't need them to contradict each other. They're all sort of operating here. All right, good. But now we must pack up every piece of the life we used to love just to keep ourselves at least enough to carry on. All right. And by the way, when he says, now we must pack up every piece of the life we used to love just to keep ourselves at least enough to carry on, we are Anne Frank there, right? He's telling you your life. She's the one that had to pack up every piece of her life just to carry on, right? Just to live a little bit longer. She had to pack everything she had, every piece of the life she used to love, and take it with her somehow. And here's where your mother sleeps. And here is the room where your brothers were born. Indentions in the sheets where their bodies once moved but don't move anymore. And it's so sad to see the world agree that they'd rather see their faces filled with flies when all I want to keep white roses in their eyes. White roses, by the way, was a symbol a pacifist group during World War II for peace. And this is one of those moments where the album breaks. There's a short break here as we head into the next song. Communist daughter. Oh. Right, it's the imagery is that winter, spring nonsense that I was saying 5 minutes ago with the Christmas trees and the snow. The springtime imagery that would be next would be new budding flowers. It's semen here. Sweet communist, the communist daughter, standing on the seaweed water. Semen stains the mountaintops. Semen stains the mountaintops. With cocoa leaves along the border, sweetness swings from every corner. It's imagery of... Right, I mean, semen is imagery of new life. It fits the sort of Coney Island ramshackle bodies melding. He has an obsession with liquids and bodies being like liquids and melding things together. But the semen imagery is new life, which is exactly what he wants to do. Is new life. And communism is this image of sharing and interpenetrating and relating to each other, not being isolated like Anne Frank in the attic, not being isolated as individuals are isolated, not being isolated, but being truly connected to everybody around you. So the communist daughter, standing on the seaweed water, by the way, the imagery is of Venus, goddess of love, coming out of the waves, right? You've seen the famous image of her sort of, anyway. The communist daughter standing on the seaweed water, semen stains the mountaintops. And then lush. It suddenly goes from cold winter to very lush, very new life. With cocoa leaves along the border, sweetness swings from every corner. Cars careening from the clouds, the bridges burst and twist around. Right? This is nature that's so powerful it breaks culture. Right? Your highways and your machines are destroyed because plant life and living things. And wanting something warm and moving, bends toward herself. The soothing proves that she must still exist, right? That she's out there somewhere and that Jeff Mangum can bring her back. She moves herself about her fist. Now, if you were asked to read the Diary of Anne Frank when you were in middle school, you probably read a censored version of it, and you should read it again. They cut out lots of stuff. She was a 14-year-old girl living with, a handful of people. Of course, she wrote about her breasts and masturbation and sexuality, and they cut that out of your middle school versions because they're jerks. But, young people have sexuality, and he's making a reference to her own, right? He's making a reference to Anne Frank's sexuality here, which is unusual, but it's an interesting image of new life and of sexuality, things wanting to get started, maybe not being able to, but wanting to get going. Sweet communist, the communist daughter, yeah, okay. Oh Comely. This song is one of the more difficult ones on the album. Oh, and Oh Comely functions a lot as a waltz as well. It has a kind of waltz quality to it. Oh Comely, I will be with you when you lose your breath. chasing the only meaningful memory you thought you had left with some pretty... I'm going to have to zip ahead a little bit so we can make sure we listen to this whole thing. Oh, comely, I will be with you when you lose your breath, chasing the only meaningful memory you thought you had left with some pretty, bright, and bubbly, terrible scene that was doing her thing on your chest. But oh, comely, it isn't as pretty as you'd like to guess. Right? It's an image of sexuality not being really what you want it to be, and some kind of bad scene here. In your memory, you're drunk on your awe to me. It doesn't mean anything at all. Oh, comely, all of your friends are letting you blow, bristling and ugly, bursting with fruits, right? This is that imagery of life that's gotten gross and rancid and broken, that dead dog that we saw earlier. Turn to the next page. You could need to say comforting things in your ear, but oh, comely, there isn't such one friend that you could find here. Standing next to me, he's only my enemy. I'll crush him with everything I own. Say what you want to say, hang for your hollow ways, moving your mouth to pull out all your miracle aimed for me. This is a very deeply confusing bit, but it's more contemporary. It's more now, and it seems to be about a modern day person that he's also going to save and swoop up in these people that he's saving. And again, he has this kind of sister-lover character from the first song. Maybe that same person. Your father made fetuses with flesh-licking ladies, right? This is life gone sour. This is overripe. Your father made fetuses with flesh-licking ladies, and you and your mother were asleep on the trailer park. Thunderous sparks from the dark of the stadium, the music and medicine you needed for comforting. It's about how important music is. This is a person who needs music and the power that music has. So make all your fat, fleshy fingers to moving and pluck all your silly strings, bend all your notes to me. Soft, silly music is meaningful, magical. The movements were beautiful, all in your ovaries. This is, again, new life via music. Music being important for creating new life. Music being a different kind of creation than sexual creation. All of them milking with green fleshy flowers while powerful pistons were sugary sweet machines. This is all overripe, over-sexual imagery, but it's musical. That this is her playing music. Smelling of semen all under the garden was all you were needing when you still believed in me. Say what you want to say, hang for your hollow ways, moving your mouth to pull out all your miracle aimed at me. And then he switches back to Anne Frank. And I know they buried her body with others, her sister and mother and 500 families. And will she remember me 50 years later? I wish I could save her in some sort of time machine, right? We had Christianity, resurrection. We had reincarnation. Now we have time travel. Whatever it takes, we're going to get this girl back. And he is also, it seems like Jeff Mangum has positioned himself as some kind of reincarnation of Peter. The boy that she loved in the attic. And he's saving her just like he's saving this character that will in a minute be mentioned as Goldeline. We know who our enemies are. Goldeline, my dear, we will fold and freeze together far away from here. This may be the person in the sort of contemporary time. There is sun and spring and green forever, but now we move to feel ourselves inside some stranger's stomach. Place your body here, let your skin begin to blend itself with mine. And then we go into, I really have got to go quick if we're going to get this done. Zipping through quickly. The Ghost song is his major, this is I think this is my favorite, by the way, part of the album is this song. But he's praying to the ghost of Anne Frank. Ghost, ghost, I know you were within me. Feel as you fly in thunder clouds above the city into one that I loved. That Anne Frank can be resurrected by flying into a person, maybe this Goldeline person mentioned in the previous song, and resurrected that way. With all that's left within me, till we tore in two, now wings and rings, there's so many here waiting for you, that everyone's waiting for Anne Frank to kind of come back and be resurrected, and he may put her in the body of someone now. She was born in her bottle rocket, 1929, with wings that ringed around a socket right between her spine. There's that spine imagery again. All drenched in milk and holy water pouring from the sky. I know that she will live forever. She won't ever die. This is this unrelenting faith that Anne Frank will live. She goes, and now she knows she'll never be afraid to watch the morning paper blow into a hole where no one can escape. The hole the paper blows into that no one can escape from is time. Right? The newspaper, you read it, you throw it away, you never think about it again. Anne Frank dies, and she's afraid of disappearing forever. She mentioned that in her book. How will people remember her? That she can survive she doesn't have to be afraid anymore because she can live forever and she won't disappear where that morning paper goes. And then he begins to connect it again to modern day things. One day in New York City, baby, a girl fell from the sky, from the top of a burning apartment building 14 stories high. And when her spirit left her body, how it split the sun, I know she will live forever, all goes on and on. It's not just about Anne Frank, it's about all of us, right? That anybody who dies should be able to live forever and not be afraid. And now she goes, she'll never be afraid. And then the final song returns us to the father who was mentioned in the first song. His suicidal father, and this whole album is an attempt to save her father. And there's a huge, by the way, I'm going quick, there's a huge musical interlude that's the greatest thing that anybody's ever composed that occurs, and it's this kind of janky funeral resurrection party, this kind of wake and rebirth for her. And I think that's this, and the success of the project is not in the lyrics, it's in the music, right? That she comes back in that kind of space. And then he can return to this coda at the end about his dad. Daddy, please hear this song that I sing. The suicidal father he wanted to save at the beginning. In your heart, there's a spark that just screams for a lover to bring a child to your chest that could lay as you sleep and love all you have left like your boy used to be long ago, wrapped in sheets warm and wet, right? The figure wrapped, we've mentioned this figure wrapped in sheets before, and it seems like it also might be Jeff Mangum, that he's left his father and his father needs someone else. Blister, which is a weird kind of brother-sister combination there. Blister, please with those wings, and we've been melding people through this whole thing. Blister, please with those wings in your spine. There's that spine of the book again. Love to be with a brother of mine. This is maybe Peter. How he'd love to find your tongue in his teeth in a struggle to find secret songs that you keep wrapped in boxes so tight, sounding only at night when you sleep. That by melding with these characters, he's able to make the music. He can find the secret songs and meld his tongue with their teeth, and that's why he's speaking for Anne Frank, because she's the inspiration for his song. And in my dreams, you're alive and you're crying, and your mouth moves in mine, soft and sweet. Again, both sex, but also speaking through him. This ghostly presence that speaks through him. Rings of flowers around your eyes, and I'll love you for the rest of your life when you're ready. I really love that little bit, because she's 14. I'll love you for the rest of your life when you're ready. Brothers, see, we are one and the same, and you left with your head filled with flames. That's that Spanish piano player, Resurrection. And you watched as your brains fell out through your teeth. Right, that's when he was killed. Jeff Mangum is going to push the pieces in place. Make your smile sweet to see. Don't you take this away. I'm still wanting my face on your cheek. I think we're going to play the album now. And the last couple of lines, I think, speak for themselves. Yeah, I'm going to let it play. Shall we listen to the album from beginning to end? Yeah. All right, here we go. Phones on airplane. Feel free to read along again.
When you were young, you were the king of carrot flowers, and how you built a tower tumbling through the trees. But don't hate her when she gets up to leave.
Woo!
notice the last thing he says, don't hate her when she gets up to leave, and then you can hear him get up to leave, and then he kind of does leave forever because there really aren't any. I mean, he plays shows around sometimes, but like there's no other albums by Nutri-Milk Hotel, and like he just told you not to hate him, that he's not going to make any more albums, and it was 20 years ago, and they included the sound of him getting up to leave in the last 4 seconds. There's so much you could do with your time in New York City, and I really appreciate you coming out here to hang out and talk about nonsense with me. Thank you so much for coming.